In the military community, political views and their expressions are very, very different than they are in the civilian space. At its core, the military is an apolitical organization, which means that it has no allegiance to any political party. They do not get involved in politics, and they have to be ready to follow the orders of a commander-in-chief or a president, regardless of their political affiliation. In fact, most of our presidents were veterans themselves, and they came from a whole variety of political parties. They were all pretty much respected for their military service over anything else, especially by service members. Every member of the armed forces shares a similar foundation that they started to cultivate in boot camp. It doesn't matter what branch they're a part of, they all have very, very similar foundations and values. In fact, the values are pretty much the same, they're just stated differently between the branches. Because of this, not only are political conversations pretty uncommon, politics do not affect them the same way that they do in the civilian world. Individuals in the military can have very differing views about political matters, and they will still work with each other just as efficiently. That's because they are willing to set aside those differences to complete their mission. They also tend to have a different perspective than individuals in the civilian world. When you start to see how vast and wild and crazy and even awful the world can be, you stop worrying about little things like who another person voted for. Here are some points of contention in the civilian world that have a very different presentation in the military world. First, and let's just jump right into it, the issue of gay marriage. So this is something that there are very, very differing opinions on, diverse opinions on, throughout the military. There are people who are all for it, there are people who are starkly against it, and the vast majority of them pretty much just don't care. That tends to be the overall theme of just about every political conflict when it comes to service members. They kind of look at it as small potatoes compared to what they have to deal with in the real world. Now, homophobia is a big deal in the military, and the reason it's there is because of institutional issues. For the longest time, I don't know if you've ever heard the term don't ask, don't tell, but if you were found to be homosexual in the military, you would be discharged. This, of course, created a culture where people did not talk about it, and it became even more taboo than it was before. However, I personally know quite a few gay service members. They just tend not to talk about it. Their squad mates even know they're gay, and they don't tend to care. To them, it's just a member of their team, and they care about them just as much as the other members of their team. Of course, there are people who are not like that, just like in the civilian world. But overall, it's a pretty neutral view on things. Another major point of contention is the use of firearms in the civilian space. So military service members are typically introduced to a rifle very early on in their service. This is especially true in the Army and the Marines. In fact, they are taught to treat this as an extension of their self, to the point where losing it is almost a death sentence, and they are taught to treat it with the greatest respect. This tool can be used to save themselves or members of their team or civilians. It is not something to be treated as a toy, and it is certainly not something that they're going to let someone take away from them very easily. Racism is, of course, an issue in the armed services, and it is an issue in general in the United States and the world. This is not intended to start an argument over how racist the U.S. is or isn't. However, I'm going to be very honest with you and tell you the reality of the situation. The reason we have made progress towards a less racist society over the years is because of service members. Medgar Evers is an excellent example of this. Medgar Evers was in the NAACP. When he got back from his service in the military, he decided that now that he had risked his life over there for his country, he sure wasn't going to let someone else take away his right to vote. Medgar Evers would specifically recruit veterans for his section of the NAACP because they were hard to scare. I really hope this inspires you to go take a look at the different civil rights leaders who were veterans. It'll be a fun homework project. You'd be surprised at how many people fought for our country and then came back and fought for our rights. The military is an extremely diverse workplace. You literally have people from all over the country and even all over the world working in the armed services. So even though it is not perfect, you are not going to find a more integrated workplace than the U.S. military. My life in military spaces has put me in contact with people from literally just about every single country. And it has been an absolute joy to get to know their different cultures through my interactions with them. There's so much more that we could talk about when it comes to military politics. But for now, I will just say that overall, the military personnel are a good reflection of the military's apolitical status. More unites them than divides them, so they tend to stay out of political conflicts and just focus on the mission, which is defending our nation from all threats, foreign and domestic.